Hi everyone, welcome to Here We Are, Brattleboro's Community Talk Show. I'm Wendy O'Connell, and our guest today is Sandy Rouse. Sandy was born, raised, lived and worked in Texas until 1999 when she bought the iconic Book Cellar here on Main Street in Brattleboro. She quickly became a community builder and advocate, joining Building a Better Brattleboro, Morningside Shelter. She was on the exhibition committee of Brattleboro Museum and Art Center, and she served as president of the Rotary Club. She got around to a lot of important places. And in 2002, she founded the Brattleboro Literary Festival, which was a success from the get-go. Notable authors from all over. And that has grown to become one of the premier book festivals in the Northeast. Welcome, Sandy.
Thank you, Wendy. It's nice to be here.
It's great to have you on the show. I know this is a busy time of year for you.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, the busiest. Couldn't be busier. So thanks for taking the time. We appreciate it.
No worries.
Yeah. So you are from Texas?
I am.
Yeah, and you were there for many years.
I was.
Yeah. And can you talk a little bit about, I know you mentioned that you were very interested in the theater during those years.
I was. When I was in high school, I had my two extracurricular activities, if you will, was I worked in the library, and I was in the theater group in a production capacity for 2 years, and I loved the theater so much. And so when I graduated, when I went to school, then I signed up for all the theater classes I could.
Was that something that your family supported? Were they an arts family?
They like to read. I don't. I can't say that. My father was a musician, and he primarily in the church, but he was the music director, and he was a soloist, and he wrote music, and he played guitar, and he played piano.
Oh.
So he was pretty musical. Neither one of them were in the theater. So yeah, I don't know.
Do you know what it was that got you interested in the theater?
I think just the energy and the imagination that it takes to do a show. Just you really have to, see what the possibilities are. It's really, really fun and fabulous, I think.
And magical as well,
Yeah,
yes.
it is.
And also the production end of it, for anything. And, I'm sure that you've carried this through to the Literary Festival. There is so much that goes into any kind of production.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that I picked up along the way. One, I just was reminded of this, I don't know why, but in one show that I was in, there was a director who, one of his lines was always, fell back to a show that he'd done a while ago where they were supposed to clear all the interior stuff off the stage and move it to an exterior shot. And somebody forgot to take off a lounge chair. And so he said, there's a chair in the garden. And he would always say, there's a chair in the garden. And that meant something was not out of place. Yeah. Yeah. And I still say it,
Do you?
Yeah, I do,
That's a good one.
Yeah.
It's amazing how those things stick, isn't it?
I know, it is. It's
Randomly.
really fun.
Yeah. So you were in school and you were studying theater and all of that in college, and you ended up, as you said, having a career with corporate America.
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
How did that happen?
Well, back then, I'm not going to say what year it was a long time ago. You had to work in the theater, you had to be a union member, which would require that you actually move to New York, and I wasn't quite ready to make that transition. I didn't know anybody in New York. I wound up getting married, and I had a baby, and I needed to make money.
Yeah.
So I still stayed active in the theater and the arts, but I just didn't do it for money ever.
And you were president of the Arts Council.
I was in Plano, yes.
In Plano.
We embarked on over $1 million project to rehab a old furniture store and a warehouse into an art gallery and a theater. And of course, this was back when construction was less money. Our president at that time was president of a telecom company, and he he would just call people up and say, "You're giving me money," and they would give him money, and that was worked out really well for us.
Yeah.
So we did all that, and then we had, pretty much like all the arts. We had a gallery that, a big gallery. We had several of them actually, but one big one, and then we had we would rent it out for events, and we had the theater that we leased out to a theater company, and they did theater year round in there.
Yeah.
And so it was a really active scene, and then I guess we had some adventures. We started bringing in these outside shows, and we had one from Zimbabwe. We had one from it was an Aboriginal artist. We had a Chinese artist. We had a bunch of different ones, but the epic one was the Vietnam retrospective, which was a 75-year retrospective of Vietnam art, and it went back to some of the art was created in like 1919. It's really old, and but it got a section of the population kind of riled up, the people who were of a certain political persuasion that fought in Vietnam, and they started instigating protests, and we had so many protests and so much. Yeah, it was crazy. We had people bomb threats and death threats and all that sort of stuff, and we'd gotten the show from the city of Dallas, who was going to present it and then backed out, and they called us and they said, we're just a little bit not sure about this, and would you be interested in taking it? And so I was like, sure, and so but we were able to put that to bed after a couple of weeks. And
really?
Then the show was up the rest of the time. It was fine.
In that job, and I'm sure in the other things that you were involved in, you did a lot of fancy footwork, right? Yeah. With many talking and negotiating with different organizations in the city and different people. And what was that? You actually used the word fearless at some point in describing how you move forward with these
I'm a little bit fearless, I'm afraid, yeah. I was the oldest child. There were three of us, and I was the oldest one. And so, my parents worked all the time, and my sisters always came to me and said, "What should I do?" So I was happy to tell them, and
they listened to you.
They did,
which is amazing. Yeah,
they did.
Yeah. So you're used to being at the helm.
I am.
Yes. In the community of Plano, you were part, as you said, of the Arts Council, but you also had a wider view of the city. You were involved in other things with the city.
Yes, it was funny. When I was, I hadn't been there very long, and I didn't love Plano because it was very suburban and very flat, and it was, just rows and rows of houses and builders landscaping and, almost no trees. So I said, they could use like a few parks. There's like thousands of children living up here, and so I would complain about the lack of parks, and so the year following the year I started complaining about it, my husband brought the paper to me and he said, "Look, they're looking for people to work on this committee. They're going to create a bond package to rehab or create 21 parks." So some of the land they already owned, and they were putting a new park in, and some of the parks that were already parks, but they were adding more equipment to them, or more planting and more trees. And so I volunteered for that, and it was interesting because I'd never worked in a municipal environment like that. And,
did you like it?
I did. Yeah. It was interesting to see how things got done. I was back there last year, and I was like, wow, this is so different.
Oh, that must have been heartening to know.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It was.
And so this was 90s? 80s,
Yeah.
90s?
Yeah,
90s.
90s.
90s. So towards the end of the 90s, you were looking for a change.
I was.
Yeah.
My husband had retired, taken early retirement from the company he was working for. I was like, well, I'm really tired of living here. There's so much traffic, so many people, and so I decided to start looking around. And my mother always wanted to live in New England I don't know, she was obsessed with moving to Maine. But she also liked Vermont. She subscribed to Yankee Magazine and all that. And so I kind of thought about that. And then we had a friend that lived up in Burlington, and we'd come up a couple of times to see him. And so I saw this classified ad I was looking at businesses for sale in Vermont. And there was a bed and breakfast, and then there was a bookstore. And so we talked about the bed and breakfast, and I said, we went and we looked at it, and it was beautiful, but it was like in an area that was not very populated, and I was like, my husband was like, there's not even a grocery store here. We can't live here. So I said, well, I didn't really want to have all those people staying with me all the time anyway. So we went to the bookstore, and I thought, now that I could do, anyway.
So you came down to Brattleboro.
I did. I'd never been here before. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that it was a classified ad.
It was a classified ad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'll buy a bookstore.
Yeah.
You've packed up, you've moved to Brattleboro. This is 99, right? And you kind of immediately dive in to building a better Brattleboro, I believe was pretty active then.
Yeah. Yeah, they came to me and asked me if I would be willing to do a photo shoot they were doing for new business owners and to talk about moving your business to Brattleboro. They were creating a packet. And so I agreed to do that, and then in the process I wound up signing up to work on the Economic Development Committee. So.
Just a short leap.
Yeah, it was really, really short.
How was that for you?
It was great.
Was it?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we were all kind of, trying to figure out how do we do that. I think I know more about it now than I did back then, but it was an interesting process to try to decide how you were going to convey the message to people to move their business here.
Yes.
Because you could talk about it all day long and say it's such a great place and the people are so great and all that, but the people want to know more concrete things that we may or may not have known, depending on...
Right, and what's in it for you as a business to move here.
Right.
You became a member of the Rotary Club. Was that something that you did in Texas, or was it new?
No. Greg Warden actually recruited me. He was 2 doors down from me, at the bookstore. And so he was in and out. We were friends. And he said, hey, why don't you, think about joining Rotary? And I said, I don't know. That's not... arts. I don't know about arts people joining Rotary. It's a little bit strange, but I was willing, and I went. Of course, the people were so nice, so incredibly nice, and did such great work.
Yeah.
It was hard to say no because you had to think about all the projects that we worked on, and yeah, so it was great.
So at the Literary Festival, again, you kind of dove into that. And can you talk about those beginning days, Sandy? It was 2002. You'd been here barely 3 years. How did that come about?
Well, initially, when I was meeting with the Economic Development Committee and the director, they were looking to put in some kind of an event that was similar to Gallery Walk, but it would be on a Thursday night, and it was for a book event for bookstores, and to have they would have you would have an author come or have some kind of a interactive event, and you'd be open late, and that was kind of people would walk around because there were 5 bookstores then, or 6. I can't never can remember.
Yeah,
there were a lot anyway, but it didn't really work out because the people who owned the bookstores didn't want to stay late on Thursday night or any other night. So that wasn't really very successful. And I think from that, now we started talking about what could we do. And then in 2001, Donna Simons, who was the president of BABS, had come to Nell or I think to Nell Hannig, who was the director, and said, gee, Saul Bellow would really like to do an event for Brattleboro because, he really, he spends a lot of time here. He loves it. He goes to the library all the time. He's, he hangs out in town, and he really, loves to do that. And so they said, can you accommodate him in a book night, a special book night? And so Dick Burns, who was the manager of Collected Works,
Right.
He said, I go to this book festival in Kurt, which is, in Ireland. And he said, we should do something like that. And I was like, yeah. I go to the, like the Book Sellers Association and those kind of things, which are like big festivals. And
Yeah.
I said, yeah, something like that would be more appropriate for a name that big. So we started thinking we would do a festival. And then Saul became very ill. He had pneumonia. And so we kind of shelved it. We just thought, it's not going to happen. And then the following year, in July.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I think I ran into Donna. She's like, hey, Saul still wants to do something. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's 3 months away. Okay. Well, okay. So as luck would have it, the New England Booksellers Association that year, for whatever reason, I think I just did it that one year, they had an initiative to where they were touring authors who were releasing new books to small towns where they wouldn't normally go, because usually they go to Boston and they go wherever they go to DC, but they don't come here.
Right.
And so so they had a list of authors that you could ask for, and so we hit the list and we got some of them, and then combined with some of the local people, which he had some pretty great local people already.
Yes, sirree, yeah.
So combined with all that, we were able to come up with a list of about, I think, 20 authors we had the first year. But when Saul Bellow is one of them, you don't have to really worry too much about
That's right.
who the others are. But yeah, it was great.
It kind of put you on the map, I think, and it was also a time when there were more smaller festivals starting to percolate a little bit around the country. I think the timing was really great, but I think just in terms of looking back at that and what you've done with it and how it's grown, it's really remarkable, Sandy. It's really remarkable.
Well, it always amazes me. We grew so fast, honestly, we were not prepared to grow that quickly.
Right,
and,
right.
I think, I remember having the committee together like the second year or the third year and saying, we really need to do some planning. We should have done this before we started, but we didn't have time.
Wow.
But we really need to do that now.
Yeah.
We need to think about where we're going.
Yes.
Because we've been out there, the cart's been in front of the horse now for 3 years, and
Yeah. It is incredible. And I just think of, I guess it was the first year when everybody was in the Book Cellar for, I think, opening evening.
Yep.
It was sort of open for authors and the public. And it was just jammed, people up the stairs, sitting up the stairs.
Yeah.
It was really exciting.
It was fun. I have photos of that, actually.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. Oh,
I should look. I probably have a photo of you. Yeah. I bet. I know. I'll have to look through them.
I'd love to see some old photos. It would be wonderful to see year by year. Also because there were so many fabulous authors and writers that came. And it just seems like it was this magnet for people, a lot of big names, obviously, that came. But again, we have so many writers in this area, but also Vermont, who you could tap. But you also were doing the little extra things. You would have poetry slams, or you would have panel discussions of various authors, which I know you still do. And those are the kind of things that broaden the whole scope of that kind of it's a true festival.
Right.
Yeah, and all the different venues in town that have accommodated the festival, and it's changed over the years.
Yeah, we've tried not to stay with a format of just being somebody standing up there reading.
Right.
And then, because that can get a little, tired after a while.
Yeah.
And But some of the festivals, interestingly enough, have gotten so big. There's like, they'll have like 200 or 300 authors and have a one-day festival. So what they do is they pile them all into a panel. And not all of them, but I mean, 6 at a time, whatever,
yeah.
on some random subject. And so they're talking to each other, but you never really connect with the authors because they're part of this panel.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we don't actually take on any panels unless it's some specific topics that we feel like we want to get into. We're moving more towards the conversation, which is really
like 2 authors together for one thing. Yeah, that's a very cool thing.
Yeah, this year we have some really great conversations, I think, going on. So.
Yes, yeah. And again, I think it's wonderful because Brattleboro is the right kind of size for this thing. Like to have everything in almost a 3-block radius there, you run into authors on the street, and authors are going to other events in some of the other venues, so that makes it really exciting as well.
Yeah, and we've had some really great events. One of them your husband was part of, as I recall.
At the museum.
At the museum.
Yes.
I remember that was so well because the photos with all those beautiful glass sculptures.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that
so
was
amazing.
It was a little tricky with all of those glass sculptures,
I'll bet.
gotta say. He had just had a book come out of historical characters talking their stories, which was pretty interesting. And who else? The photographer was Brendan Sheehan. Brendan Sheehan, was that his name?
Beowulf Sheehan.
Beowulf Sheehan.
Yeah.
Yes. Wonderful photographers.
He's still our photographer.
Oh, he is? I didn't know that.
He is. Yeah.
He stayed on.
Yeah.
That's the photographer you were speaking about.
Yeah.
He's fabulous. Some of the best photos.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
I mean, he's photographed President Biden. He's photographed so many people, just incredible, politicians and world leaders and authors from the upper ranks, really.
He is excellent. That's so great that that's the magnet that Brattleboro is. It calls people back.
It does.
Yeah, it really does. Also, you are partnering with a couple different bookstores for book sales during the festival this year.
Right, yeah, 2 new ones are involved. One, they're not new bookstores, but they're new to us. One is Toadstool Books in Keene, which is a big general interest bookstore. They have 2 locations. They have one in Peterborough, and they have a new owner who's very young and very energetic and more than happy to come over here and spend time with the authors and the books.
That's great.
And then the other is Wild Book Company, which is up in Newfane. And it used to be Old New England Books, was owned by Mary Hill.
Oh, yes.
Mary Hill went on to the next life and left it to her daughter, who lives in, I'm not going to remember the name of the town, but it's somewhere in Northern California. And so she still, as Mary did, she comes out here in the summer and opens up the store.
Oh, and that's Wild Book Company in Newfane. And Toadstool Books. And your headquarters is going to be at the Brooks House Library, the Brooks House Lobby. Yes. And that's sort of where books will be sold.
Yeah, the books will be sold there by Wild Book Company, and then they'll be sold at the events by Toadstool.
In the various locations. Things are free and open to the public, as
they are.
always
Free, yes.
are. I don't know how you do that.
I don't either.
It's an honest response. It's going to be October 13th through the 15th.
It is.
I just want to mention, during the pandemic, I'm pretty sure it was during the pandemic, you came up with a literary cocktail hour.
Yes.
Which you have continued.
We have.
Yes. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, we started it in May of 2020. I guess that was it. Yeah, that was. Yeah, so it was like 2 months after the pandemic started.
Yeah.
We realized we needed to do something because people were losing their minds, being locked up, and so we started doing these online events, and we quickly learned how to make everything work, and we started inviting authors, and they were more than happy to participate because it was, suddenly they weren't touring anymore.
Right.
And they felt a lot safer doing that kind of event.
Yeah.
So the idea of spending the time on Friday is the second Friday of every month, and the idea of spending that time talking about books, or or listening to people talk about books, and you can comment and ask questions online instead of going to the local watering hole where you can't hear anything. Appeal to a lot of people, and we discovered there was an audience that was that we were missing completely. People that were homebound all the time, not just for the pandemic, and also people who had small children, people who worked on weekends. If they were in the hospitality industry, that never got to come to the festival because they were always working.
Yeah, yeah. That's pretty exciting. I mean, that's one of the creative pivots that happened during the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you've kept up with that, and you do that throughout the year.
We do it every month.
Every month.
Yeah. We skip a couple of months, like we're not going to have one this month or not in September but we had one last September. I'm not going to say we're never going to have one, but this festival is going to be such a huge thing this year. Maybe it's better that we don't try to do that too.
Is this bigger than usual, Sandy?
It's bigger, yeah. It's bigger. A lot of big names and a lot. I won't say it's the most authors we've ever had, but it's getting really close to it.
Yeah, it's a huge. I checked out the list. It's really huge. Yes, yeah. Anything else you'd like to say about the festival this year?
I don't think so. I just hope we see everybody there. We're going to be in 4 different venues this year to accommodate all the extra. One of them will be the new. I've been calling it 22 High Street.
Oh,
but
the
it's
high and green building.
Yes,
which is also where Hatch Space is.
It is.
Yes, that's great. The front of that space.
Yeah, the front of it on the High Street side.
Right.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
That'll initiate that building as well.
Yeah. Yeah, Tom's excited about it.
Tom Bodette, yes. We have Tom to thank for the reinvigoration of that entire building. It's really remarkable. Sandy, thanks so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
It's great to hear all about where you've come from, and also I think we all can see that you've had a whole many years of
many more years, many
years of preparing for the literary festival, and all of the different the cogs in the wheel that it takes to put this on. Yeah, it's an amazing endeavor, and I'm very grateful. I know the community is grateful to you for taking it on and making it happen every year.
Yeah,
no matter
well,
what.
I have a great team. I don't do it alone.
Yes.
That's for sure.
Yes, you do have a great team.
I would be really up a creek if I had to do
You
it
would
myself.
be. Sandy, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Yeah, really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah.
I know that today alone you were in between a couple different vendors trying to make plans.
I was. Yeah, I've got one more stop to make, and then I'm going to call it a day.
We're gonna let you go. Thank you. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
Okay.
All right. Thanks to all of you for joining in today and to listening to all of Sandy's stories and how she got here and how much she has brought to our community, how grateful we are to her, and also the teams that she's worked with. So keep in mind the Literary Festival is coming up October 13th through 15th, that weekend, that long weekend. 4 different venues, and check out the website. We'll have the information at the end of the show. It's BrattleboroLitFest.com. You can scroll through and check out the amazing authors that are going to be with us this year. And we'll see you back here on Here We Are next time. Thank you so much.